it's back. Let me do one thing real quick.
Sure.
Okay. All right. Perfect. Okay. Thank you all for joining tonight. Thank you again to Katie and Shane for getting this set up. It's a privilege to be able to speak, about my experience with Project Mexico and Hellenic College, and then get to talk about service in general. So as you know, I'll be talking about service tonight. My name is Gabriel Fahling. I'll give you some background info about myself before going into our main topic of service. So I was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, and my family and I moved from Mississippi when I was 7 years old to Washington State, the Seattle area where my mom is from. And so we had some more family out there. And I grew up in that general area. And I was homeschooled through 8th grade, attended a homeschool co-op part-time, and then went to public school starting in 9th grade. And then graduated from high school in 2019, and then finished getting my associate's degree at a local community college in 2020. And then from there, I did some service work over time. I was at Project Mexico. Now I'm at Hellenic College. I guess a little more background before I go into, I'll focus on Project Mexico and Hellenic, but I come from a big family of 7 siblings. I have 6 older brothers and then a little sister. 5 of my siblings are married. I have 7 nieces and nephews and another one on the way. So yeah, big family, and it's fun when we all get together. We got together more recently because our sister got married in January. So yeah, it's always nice to be. We're kind of scattered around. I'm, near Boston, and then my parents are in Idaho now. But yeah, and then I guess things I enjoy doing, I play the piano, not as much anymore, but that's something that I grew up a little bit doing. Played soccer all the way through high school and haven't kept up with that as much. But really, my favorite pastime is probably just spending time with people, going out, going hiking, being in nature, just being with people, whatever we're doing, can be really simple. So that's kind of, I don't know, I guess my passion is just being with people, which is probably why I want to study psychology. And yeah, so I graduated. Well, let me start. So 2017 was the first time that I went to Project Mexico. And I went on a home building trip with my parents, and my sister and my brother Oliver was there as an intern. And it was a good experience. I liked it enough to go back the next year. And then during that year, I kind of knew I wanted to be an intern the next summer. And so I ended up becoming an intern the next summer. My brother Oliver was leading the home building program there. He was the work trip coordinator. And that experience in 2019 was really, that was it was one of the best experiences of my life. Really just, there was a lot of grace there. And, I loved it. I just loved getting to interact with people from all over, being in this process of building a home. And yeah, it was just really about the people and everything for me. So I, kind of resolved to go back the next summer to intern again. During the meantime, I was finishing getting my associate's degree. I was living at home. And then, it was COVID in 2020. And like they didn't do any home building. So it ended up looking best if I just stayed home, kept working. I was working a job as a behavior technician with kids with autism at that time. Um, and then I did that. So I didn't go to Mexico that summer, and I did that job until September of 2020, from January to September. And then I did an internship in fall of 2020 with the Neighborhood Resilience Project in Pittsburgh, which is run by Father Paul Abernathy. And that was a cool experience. They do a lot of good work in the community there. Um, and hopefully a place I'll be able to go back and visit sometime. But then the next summer, I committed to the SISW program, or St. Innocent Service Works. I committed to 15 months of service with them because I knew in high school, like I don't know if it was in high school or just after I finished the internship at Project Mexico, I knew I wanted to serve in some way, to do service work, missionary work, um, just kind of spend some time being able to carry out my faith in a tangible way, do something that was just like, you could see the physical effect of it. Um, I wasn't really compelled to go to college right away. Yeah, I mean, I finished getting my associate's degree, but thankfully I was able to take classes during high school, so it sped up that process. But I'd really just wanted to like serve, and so that's what I did after I got my associates. I was able to do that internship in Pittsburgh, and then after that, I was back home for a bit, and I was leading a youth group with my church, and then we had two other churches within that youth group. But then, before that was right before I went and started my 15 months of service with St. Innocent Service Works. I was sent to Orange County, California, in summer of 2021. And it was me and three others there, Daniel Kroll and Elise Bushbacher and Maria Anna Materos. And we were working with FOrCE Southern California, doing a lot of food distribution and what else? We helped a lot with like food distribution. What else did we do? We went down to Mexico twice actually during that time. The first time I went down, we were there for, I think, like kind of a long week, like not for a home building. We went and I think painted a house and we helped out around the ranch, but we weren't there super long. But I remember, I think I was shooting hoops with Father Nicholas Andrew Chow, and I think he was asking what my plans were, kind of what was going on in my life, and I was like, oh yeah, I signed up for 15 months of service, and then I was like, they have me in Orange County right now, but I don't know where I'll be after the summer. And Father Nick kind of jokes, and he's like, you'll end up here. And then he's like, nah, I'm kidding. But then he goes, you'll probably end up here. Or at least that's as I remember it. And so I was like, okay, cool. Like I didn't bank on that, but I was like, that would be cool. It'd be nice to go back and live in Mexico. Since, I was acquainted with it there. And yeah. And so we went back the next month for another home build the first home build that summer. And that was when Father Nick and Prez Mary Lynn asked if I wanted to stay there for the rest of the duration of my commitment to that service work. So a year there. And, I had my spiritual father okayed it, and I was able to go down, thankfully. And so I moved there, and I finished up my internship in Orange County, went back home for a little bit, and then moved down to Mexico in September of 2021. And I ended up spending almost 2 years there. But it was a kind of a transforming experience in a way. It wasn't like an overnight transformation, but it really is a different way of life down there. the summer that I spent there as an intern was wonderful, and amazing. During the off season, fall and winter and spring, um, it's more difficult living down there, but there's still so much, good work that's done. During during my first year there, I was helping with online school. Initially, the kids were still in online school because of COVID, and Mexico hadn't, at least in Tijuana, they hadn't really opened up the schools at that point. So I'd spend one day a week with two of the middle school boys, kind of keep them on track, supervise them, and help out where I could. My Spanish wasn't very good at the time. And then I'd spend one day a week with the high school boys, kind of supervising, making sure that they weren't, on Facebook or just like doing things they weren't supposed to, watching YouTube. And so, I got to know the boys at the orphanage and got to be, more acquainted with that, which I hadn't as much when I spent just a summer there. And I also spent, there was about 5 months, I think, where like on Saturdays, I would work as a consejero or counselor, which is more like almost like babysitter. Not necessarily, but you watch the kids, you supervise them, you hang out with them, spend time, and then, you had to play soccer or whatever, and then kind of keep them from beating up each other as well. But yeah, just kind of hanging out with them. And then I also worked with the pigs for, I think, a couple months. What else was I doing? I worked, but I think this is mainly during my second year, but during my first year as well, I believe, like just I would drive people around, people who need rides, the boys, staff. So that was kind of a big thing. And then, I'd help out with projects. So, and then during my first year there, it kind of felt like, it seemed like a good place for me to stay for another year. So I committed to another year while I was still there. And then that summer, that next summer, that after I'd been there, 9 months or whatever, I was helping with home building full time during the summer. I did, I think, some help in the off season, but that was the main thing, that drew me down there, was the home building. And so I was excited, that was my favorite part. And so, yeah, so yeah, I did the home building there, which, just tell some folks. Yeah, so I helped out with the home building, and sorry, I'm getting my thought. Yeah, and that's just love that part. So got to connect again with that, 3 years after my first internship, and got to help out full time this time, more acquainted with the ranch, so I was able to help out more. And for people who come down there for like a week, and maybe, I'm not sure how, I know at least some of you on here have been down there for a week, for a home building trip, maybe not all of you. But basically when you go there, you'll notice the ranch, as we call it down there, the Project Mexico and St. Innocent Orphanage, the whole property. It's a 16-acre property, and yeah, it's originally like a horse farm, and then they're raising pigs there. So you see that when you go there, and then but it's like its own little like microcosm. You have houses, you have like I lived there full time, obviously, so there's housing, and there's housing for long-term staff, for the interns, for the older boys who live at the orphanage, and then you have like kind of the orphanage itself up top, and that's where a lot of like the younger boys are, like up to middle school usually, are there, and then yeah, you have high school, college, and like big houses down below at another part of the property. And so that's kind of the layout of the ranch. If you've never been there, and like at least some of you have. But anyway, so I was helping out with that, around the ranch during the off season, and then home building during the summer. And then during my second year there, I did more like kind of projects around the ranch and various ones. We like replaced the roof on the shower building for the orphanage. Helped lay like a new concrete pad for this building that's, may go up sometime, that they have like a community center. And then again, I was like giving rides to people and running errands, taking cars to get their tires replaced. And yeah, and then the next summer after that, and I was also the hospitality person, so I would help arrange accommodations for guests. And I enjoyed that as well. So I got to wear many hats, and that's usually how it is down there with people. You fill in kind of where is needed, and people work very hard down there. I was down there with there were probably around 7 of us living down there full time. When I was living there, it fluctuated. But yeah, you see that, people jump into different roles. And so it's kind of neat to get to experience all of that. And, Father Nick and Pres Mary Lynn were super supportive, and, they always check in on us and make sure we have everything we need. And they are really like amazing. I can speak very highly of them genuinely. Like they really show us a lot of love, and you can see the love that they have in their own ministry and how they treat us. And I had a great support group among my, the people I was serving with as well, very good friends of mine who I got to go down and see recently, which was really cool, for our spring break trip for the college. And so during my second year there serving, I kind of started to feel like, I kind of started daydreaming a lot, like, man, I don't know if this is where I want to be. I wasn't sure if I was going to stay another year, if I like what I was going to do. And I just kind of felt this inwardly that, it's time for a change. And I didn't know exactly what that was. I didn't know if it was working full time, going to school, or I wanted to go, maybe live with family, or maybe go back to school full time. But it wasn't exactly clear. Nothing really stuck. And then it was about April, I think, of last year, I guess. Yeah, it was not too long ago. So almost a year ago. I think it was specifically like Lazarus Saturday, where I just had this kind of feeling that a semester of faith, at Hellenic College was kind of the way to go. And because I had visited the college just a year before that, I had friends there, and then of course my brother Oliver and his wife Olivia were living there, because my sister-in-law Olivia graduated from here last May. And so I got to kind of see it, experience it. And I had known about Semester of Faith for a while. It sounded cool, but I guess never really was super realistic, or just wasn't what I was doing at that time. But then I just had this piece about it that kind of stuck. I was praying on it and thinking about it. And then, I got my spiritual father okayed, applying and seeing what happens for, I was originally going to come this semester, but then I think it was Oliver, my brother, who kind of convinced me to come in the fall, go straight from Mexico to here. And so I tried for that, and they were still accepting people for the fall semester at that time. So I applied in May, was accepted in June of last year, and then I came here in late August. We finished home building August 17th, and then I think I arrived here August 22nd. So it was a very quick turnaround. And I was exhausted from the summer, but it was good. I mean, I think, I'm glad I took Oliver's advice. And my experience at Hellenic so far has been really good. It wasn't even, a huge culture shock. People ask about, living in Mexico and then living here. There's definitely, of course, there's big differences, but in terms of specifically Hellenic College, Holy Cross, there's similarities between the environments where you have, it's an Orthodox environment. You have a bunch of, it's, almost all Orthodox people here. You have a chapel on campus that you walk to, on the ranch, you have the chapel there, you have services, and you're all, living together, eating together, and just kind of going through life together. Here it's more classes, you have student workers as well. And then there it's more, obviously doing more physical work. Um, but so it wasn't a complete culture shock. And I had gone back to the US enough during my time there that it was I was more used to it. But it was really a good transition. It was good to be back in school. The education here has been fantastic. I got to take a variety of classes last semester. Um, and it's really cool to be able to talk about your faith and talk about God very openly in the classes, and how there's that base, that foundation for the classes. It feels like, I went from one Orthodox community to another, and I think that's really helped kind of strengthen that in me and kept it more consistent. Whereas, if I was living in the world on my own, it would be harder to keep that. And so, I mean, the professors here have been fantastic, really supportive, really helpful. Um, they want you to succeed, and they kind of facilitate that. They challenge you. And yeah, and they've really helped me out. And so I ended up, during my semester of faith, I figured I'd probably want to stay and finish a degree in psychology. And so I ended up deciding that during the semester of faith, that was indeed what I was going to do. And so I ended up staying. Obviously, I'm still here this semester. Now I'm full-time in the psychology program. And the professor for that, Dr. Erica, is amazing, very blessed to have, a Christian basis for psychology and really have that foundation. Um, I can speak very highly of the education here and the community as well. If you really try to integrate yourself into the community, it's, you find some wonderful people here, um, and just the area itself as well. So it's been a good transition from going from Mexico to back to learning, back um, to another Orthodox environment where I can be kind of filled more. Now I can be filled more intellectually. I also work in the admissions office here part-time. Um, and so I've had many good opportunities, a lot of people here helping me out. Um, that's been an amazing, common factors, in Mexico, a lot of support, a lot of people, they just want to help you out, and here as well. So it's been really, really blessed. I'm a junior this year, so I have one more year left. And then we'll see where I go from there. But anyway, yeah, so that's kind of my long background. Forgive me if I rambled on. So I wanted to jump into kind of the main part of this talk, which is service as a way of life. Originally, the title was on serving God and neighbor. So forgive me if that was if you expected something different from that by the end of this talk. This seemed like a more appropriate title considering when I was putting it together. So, so we'll kind of jump into that, and kind of there's a few components to service that are seen. Like, you see humility as an essential characteristic. There's kind of a pouring out of yourself for the other person, or kenosis is I'll get into in a bit, and then just being in communion with another person is another aspect of it, and those are all really just essential characteristics of it, of how to truly serve someone. Um, and I've certainly not perfected this, not even close. I can't hold myself as an example, but I've seen this in others. I've seen it, reading the lives of the saints, and the teachings from Christ as well. You see kind of our calling to serve, um, to be a light to the world, and to reach out to those who need it, to those in darkness, and those who, sometimes people who don't have as much material need. Um, so it's really an essential part of our life is that we must become servants. Um, and so the first, aspect of this that I notice is that humbling yourself is an essential characteristic of true service is humility. So in chapter 20 of the Gospel of Matthew, Jesus is headed toward Jerusalem with his disciples. And he tells them that he's going to be arrested and killed, and then he's going to rise on the third day. And there's no mention of the disciples responding to this, which is interesting. I don't know if they ignored it or if he just left out a part there, if Matthew did that. But Matthew follows this up by telling about how James and John's mother comes up to Jesus and asks Jesus if James and John can sit in the kingdom of heaven at his right hand and at his left. Jesus replies that, this is not mine to give, but my Father's to give. And then the other 10 disciples are indignant. So Jesus pulls them aside, and he says, and he addresses this, and he says, "You know that the rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their high officials exercise authority over them. Not so with you. Instead, whoever wants to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wants to be first must be your slave. Just as the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." So Jesus himself is our example of a true servant. He is God and yet became man and suffered with us. He was born in a cave and in a manger, and he labored for years as a carpenter before he even started his ministry. He allowed himself to be baptized by John the Jordan. He was God and yet allows him to baptize him. He washed his disciples' feet at the supper as an example for them to follow. And then, of course, he dies on the cross for us. So our whole Christian life is meant to be an imitation of this humility. We should seek to serve one another. We should seek regarding ourselves as lower, than our brother or sister, which is a difficult point to reach. Not losing our dignity, but also really humbling ourselves before our fellow man. And this is a really important point of service, is that we're not coming from a place of being above the other person, but we're kind of almost consider ourselves below. Even if we have the means, better financial means than someone, we're giving out money to the homeless or giving away, whatever it is, clothes, shoes. It's like, these are ways we can serve, but also how are we connecting with these people? And even with our friends, our parents, like it's never about being above the other person, and just giving them what we have, but we're giving ourselves. We should seek the ways in which we can serve people and be useful to them, and no act or labor of love should be too good for us. And the life of Saint Theodosius of the Kiev Caves is one that I want to talk about, because it's such a good example of this incredible humility that really we want to strive to exemplify. If you haven't read about Saint Theodosius, I would highly recommend reading his life. You maybe already have enough stuff to read, but it's accessible online. It's really amazing. His biographer is Saint Nestor of the Kiev Caves. So if you look for it, that's where it is. Saint Theodosius was born in the 11th century in a town outside of Kiev. And from his youth, he was very pious. He would wear, quote, coarse and patched garments. And when his parents tried to make him put on fresh clothing and play with other children, he would not obey, for he wanted to be identified with the poor, end quote. And starting when he was about 13 years old, he would go out into the fields with his family serfs and work with them. And his mother didn't like this and tried to keep him inside, so that he, wouldn't go out to work with them. And humility was extended throughout his life. I mean, you see many examples. Even when he became the abbot of the Kiev Caves community, when he was appointed, St. Nestor says that he kept in mind the words of our Lord, whosoever will be the greater among you, let him be your minister. And that he was, he kept in mind, he considered himself the least of all, serving everyone and offering himself as an example. He would, even when he was abbot, he would still be the first one to start work or be at liturgy. There's a story that once there was no firewood chopped for the kitchen. And so someone came to St. Theodosius telling him to order some of the monks to chop the wood. I think he says like some of the idle monks or something like that. And then St. Theodosius replies, he goes, I am idle, so I will do it. And so he tells the monks to go into the refectory, and he starts to chop the wood. And after dinner, the monks found him still working. And so they each grab a hatchet and start helping him out. And then they had plenty of wood for a while. And that's, one example. But my favorite story is he was returning from visiting the prince at that time, Prince Iziaslav. And so he goes there, and then by the time he's done with his visit, it's evening, and Prince Iziaslav orders a coach for him to take him back to the monastery, because it's late, and he wants him to be able to rest in the coach. And they had, a good relationship. And so St. Theodosius gets in the coach, and the coachman mistook him for like a beggarly monk. And he says to him, look here, monk, you are free every day to do as you please, while I must spend my life in toil. Let me lie down in the coach and you ride the horse. It obviously not knowing who he is. And it's a long journey as well. They have to travel through the night. But St. Theodosius, agrees, doesn't object at all. He takes up the reins, and, he's rejoicing and praising God along the way while he's doing this, while he's riding the horse. And it says that when sleep would overcome him, he would start to walk, and then he'd go back. I think when he's tired from walking, he'd like jump back on the horse and keep going. And so he does this, through the night. And then when it's light out, when it starts to get light out, there are these boyars or Russian noblemen who recognize him from a distance, and they come up and they bow before him. And St. Theodosius at this point wakes up the coachman to tell him, he's like, it's light. He goes, it's light out. Take up the reins again, basically. Tells him to continue his work. And so the coachman sees the nobleman venerating him and, paying their respects. And he's kind of wondering like, what's going on? And so he keeps going. And then he notices that all of the noblemen they pass are like paying their respects to St. Theodosius. And he's like, yeah, it's really interesting. He kind of is like, what's going on? By the time they get to the monastery, then like all of the brothers of the monastery come out to greet St. Theodosius, and they bow before him. They each bow before him. And, they greet him, bow before him. And then the coachman's like, who is this guy? And he's kind of dismayed a bit. And St. Theodosius takes the coachman by the hand to the refectory and orders that he be given as much food and drink as he likes. And then he pays him and lets him go. And St. Theodosius, obviously, he never said a word about this, but the coachman told the brothers about it. And so you just see this it's this incredible humility that he has, that he was willing to serve, this coachman who probably had not labored as hard as St. Theodosius himself, because you read about his life, it's like he didn't sleep much. He was working constantly, working and praying constantly. It's incredible. But this is an example of humility we can strive to imitate, where we don't make excuses for why we can't do something, or any work is too lowly for us. It's like, no, this is how we grow in our humility. This is how we should, we should be open to what God is asking us to do in any moment. And St. Theodosius really took this, he took this to heart. He just had this incredible humility for everyone. He considered himself the lowest, really, and just showed incredible love through it. This is something that I even, this really beautiful humility I saw recently. We had our forgiveness vespers here, and we go through and ask forgiveness. And we didn't, it was kind of just a bow, or, you do like a little Matanya, I think, and then ask forgiveness. But there was at least one person, I think it was several, who actually would grab your hand and kiss it. And it was just really striking for me. It was moving, beautiful, because these are people like I go to school, I see like almost every day, and maybe I've talked with them, laughed with them, joked with them, and maybe they've had their own disagreements with people, but they had this just incredible humility towards their fellow classmates, towards their fellow schoolmates, to be able to grab their hand and kiss it. I mean, imagine if every one of us treat each other like this, like to see the image of God in each person and reverence it in such a way. Like wouldn't we do that to Christ? Like we'd bow before him, but like to kiss his hand, we kiss the hands on the icon, we kiss their feet, or the feet of Christ, but it's the hands of a saint. And if we saw each other like this every day, can you imagine like what that would be like? How would the world be different? And it's just really, that was a moving example that really got to me. And so this humility is just really an essential part of service. And we have to humble ourselves first, as Christ says. We must become servants first of all. And then, then we can become greatest. We lower ourselves. He who humbles himself will be exalted, and he who exalts himself will be humbled, conversely. So really, we are called to do this directly by Christ. And then another aspect of service that, really we could say perhaps is the highest form of service is this concept of kenosis, or self-emptying. And this is discussed by Father Maximus Constant in his book, The Art of Seeing. He notes how St. Paul says that, quote, Christ emptied himself as if of his divine form and voluntarily relinquished his equality with God, end quote. Here he is referring to St. Paul's epistle to the Philippians, chapter 2, verses 6-8, where St. Paul writes, Christ Jesus, being in the form of God, did not consider equality with God to be used for his own advantage, but emptied himself, taking the form of a slave, being born in the likeness of men. And being found in human form, he humbled himself and became obedient to the point of death, even death on a cross. And Father Maximus writes that, assuming the form of a slave, he subjected himself to the conditions of human life. The contours marked out by the form of the slave encompass fully the person and work of Christ, for his whole life was an ongoing sacrifice, a ceaseless self-offering. So Christ's our perfect example of who we should strive to imitate, to be like, was Christ. And he's the one who always offered himself, always, even just becoming man, God becoming man, the humility, the offering his whole self to us, and really making it so we could become fully human, so we could become more like God, or at least kind of restoring, or really giving us an example of this. And so this is obviously our highest example is Christ himself. He's the one who pours out his life for the life of the world. So how are we to imitate this in our own lives? Obviously, we're not God, and we're just made human. That's the way we are. And, our life is a gift from God. We don't need to humble ourselves to take form in a human body, but it's all through God's love that we have this. But we can offer ourselves to others, and we can become slaves to Christ, as St. Paul says. I think in one of the epistles, and we can become humble servants of our families, friends, co-workers, even our enemies too, to serve, to respond to hatred with love. Um, it's not just about being humble, but also, you know, serving others. I mean, it's like, think of a mother with her child who will, stay up through the night with the child for, maybe weeks on end, is barely getting sleep because the child can't sleep. But the mother's there because she loves the child, and she's pouring herself out. She's offering herself to really be with this child and nurture it. Or two people in love, and they're going to give themselves for each other always. It doesn't matter. And one of the priests Father Philip Samaris, gave a lecture here recently where he's talking about two people in love. It doesn't matter if a guy's pursuing his beloved. It doesn't matter if he has to climb mountains. It doesn't matter if he has to go through thorns or whatever, if he goes hungry, if he loses sleep. It's all about really being in that relationship with someone. Mother with child, two people in love, or just whoever we're serving. And we have a great example of this with Saint Maria of Paris, or Saint Maria Skoptsova, who's a more modern saint, just died in the last century. But she was one who, she was fled to Paris in 1923. She was from Russia. And then she was tonsured in Paris, or in France, as a nun. And then she kind of helped found these houses, one main one for serving the needy Russian emigres during the time. And she just absolutely poured herself out in her work. They would serve they got up to like 120 dinners served each day at this house that she had, was supported, really had founded. And then she would even go to beg food or buy cheaply whatever was not donated. And then she ended up renting a building for families in need and another for single men. And she also founded a sanatorium. She had just had this incredible love for people and really emphasized this service aspect, this pouring herself out for the people that she wanted to serve. And this is because this is Christ's command. Like, she worked tirelessly to do this. And she has a wonderful saying that it is not enough to give. We must have a heart that gives. And, she was sustained by this through Christ. She said, there's no hardship in it, since all the relief comes my way. God having given me a compassionate nature, how else could I live? And she ended up being arrested and put in a concentration camp. And she died there in a gas chamber. And it's said that she may have taken the place of another person. We're not really sure, but, you see, she really lived this out of pouring herself out for other people. And I've seen this, even in my own experience with service and the people that I've met, even with literally when I was reading this about kenosis, like thinking of like Father Nicholas. He'll have to forgive me for throwing out his name here if I embarrass him, but if he watches this, but even like seeing how much he puts into the ministry of Project Mexico and Saints Orphanage, he does a million things at once and just shows, cares for everybody there. You see his relationships with the boys and they respect him. And he just goes around always like just working tirelessly to make sure everything's taken care of. And then he's a priest, of course, as well. And so he serves and he hears confessions on Saturday nights. He's sat with me, when I'm not doing too great, and like just offers himself to be there. And he's a very good example of that. And, even here on campus, some of the people I've known through like working with enrollment that just like tirelessly working because they love what they're doing, because they love the people that are involved in the mission that they have, this calling from God that they're choosing to fulfill. And so that's really, you can see examples of this in personal life. Like you probably know people like this as well. And that's what we should really strive to reach that. Obviously, it's not overnight. And also, we need to remember to kind of set limits and not overexert ourselves. But there's really, the last to kind of wrap up the talk, I want to talk about like kind of very small ways that we can serve, practical ways, because everyone's situation in life is different. I've kind of talked about these lofty goals for service, but even just, there's a quote that's attributed to Mother Teresa. I'm not sure if she said, but it's like, if you want to change the world, go home and love your family. So even starting there by serving, our parents or brothers or sisters, doing the dishes for them, cleaning the house without being asked, um, running errands without being asked, or kind of stepping in when they're tired and taking over. Um, very just little things, or apart from that, when you're out, talk to a homeless person on the street, ask them what they need, offer to buy them lunch and sit with them. Us or yeah, when you're out, just noticing people who might be in need, or noticing around you the people who you're acquainted with, friends, family who may need, you need your help, or someone, or if they ask you for a favor, like saying yes, if it's not an enormous inconvenience, even if it's something you don't want to do, discerning when God is asking you to really give up your own will. And so those are little simple ways, but then even at our own parish, collecting food for the hungry at your own church, trying to get some type of ministry going that's going to like give back in some way, a soup kitchen. But it can be simpler. It can be like a winter clothing drive, even just going out once a month to feed the homeless, things like that. Volunteering at a local homeless shelter, going to a food bank, prison ministry. And I would say, if you feel compelled to as well, like depending on what stage you're in life, like for me, I felt like I wanted to do service, after getting my associate's degree, and I wanted to, kind of dedicate my time to that. Um, and so like for any of you listening to this, like who would be interested in that, um, I would say like kind of, if that's what God's calling you to, like follow that, even if it's just like a couple months serving somewhere or volunteering, somewhere full time. Um, really listen to that, because maybe you'll be sent out into the mission field for a couple of years. I know Father Nick is really big on, doing like 2 years of missionary work. Um, and, at some point in your life. And of course, that may not be now, but um, really it's worth it just to get kind of pour yourself into that and see, because you reap the benefits of it too. It's like, it's life-giving as well. And it's, what Christ calls us to do, to serve one another. Um, and this is unique to each of us, how this looks. But if that's something that touches your heart, it's like, it's worth at least doing a mission trip, Project Mexico, home building for a week. Or, another mission trip that you know of, or service trip in the domestically. There's so much need, and there's so many opportunities. Um, Not as many right now in the Orthodox world, but it's growing. It seems like, this is something that we should consider in our own lives, is really stepping out of our comfort zone and going into these places and helping out. And then those are, so yeah, just kind of really, and in your daily life, I think one of the most important things is just the most important thing that you can do, that's almost a service in itself, is just an act of love that we can do, is praying for others. And that's really the most basic one that's like anyone can do. Um, and I think through that, that can be kind of a segue into, um, maybe God's calling you to really physically serve them, but we can love anyone just by praying for them. And that should really be the foundation of our service to others, of our way of being with them. So I would definitely encourage you to, you know, look into the ways that you can serve in your everyday life. You can humble yourself and say yes to those around you, to God, see what's needed, and just and even just trying to be there with people and to love them in whatever way that is, even if it doesn't necessarily mean serving them, just being in communion with them, just talking with them and making time for what's important with your friends and family. But of course, with the emphasis of this talk is serving, definitely serving wherever you can, those little ways that we can do in our everyday life. We don't have to go across the world, across the country, but right here, right now, we can do this. And it starts with prayer, and and then from there we move outward, and we can all grow from this. We can all become more like Christ in this way. So that's all I have for now. But thank you for listening. Yeah, I hope I didn't ramble on too much, and I hope you were able to take at least something away from this. But I appreciate all your attention. Yeah, thank you so much all for being here. It's
That
been
was great,
a
Gabe.
privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I think we have time for a question if you wanna take it. And
Okay.
looks like Jim commented in the chat if you want to take a look at that, with regards to being humble.
Yes, let me see. If we not give up.
Oh yeah, Katie's a good one too.
Yeah. Yeah, I would, Jim, I would say, and it's also good to hear from you, Jim. Um, I remember you from the St. Athanasius groups. So I appreciate the question. I think you're exactly right. If we truly humble ourselves, the statement is, I think if we truly humble ourselves, we are not giving up our dignity, in reality, strengthening our dignity. And I think that's very true. There's actually a really good quote from St. Nikolai Velimirovich that says this, or it's attributed to him. I've seen it, at least. And it says, be humble, for the worst thing of the world is of the same stuff as you. Be confident, for the stars are of the same stuff as you. So really in our humility, like, we humble ourselves, we're really, like you said, we're strengthening our dignity, because that's kind of our natural state. That's what God has created us to be. That's kind of I don't know. It's funny because I was kind of doing a presentation on Tuesday that talked about this, like, human dignity, as being the basis for human rights, as a presentation on criminal justice and stuff. But yeah, it's hard for me. I'm very scatterbrained, so I'm trying to, like, pull this all together. But I would definitely say that that's a correct statement. Like, if we're humbling ourselves, we're becoming more of our true selves, and we're becoming more closer to the likeness of God, which is what God intended for us, of course. To become more like Him, to be in communion with Him. And, like, that's, the most dignity that we can have, is to be, striving, moving towards that, to be identifying with Him. So we identify ourselves with Christ. Like, he had his dignity, of course. Like, he's literally God. And, when we identify and we unite ourselves with Him, then we also we become more dignified, really. We're not putting on any facade. We're becoming our true self, as God made us to be. And yeah, and it doesn't mean that we become, just like pushovers. I mean, you see Jesus himself spoke out against, the Pharisees and the scribes, and drove people out of the temple. I mean, he did all of this. And so you see, he's, obviously had plenty of dignity. And yeah, so I think that's a good point that you made there. Thank you for kind of posing that question, Jim. You're definitely right. And then do we have
yeah, one
time
more.
for
Yeah,
to
one
respond to
more
your
from Katie.
question,
Sorry,
Katie?
I was talking and I had it on mute. So
Oh, you're
yeah,
good.
a
Yeah,
more.
I just saw that. Okay. Sorry
Yeah.
that this is running over, by the way, to anyone.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, yeah. No worries.
Thank you for your question, Katie. Okay, so the question is, can you create a life of service without falling into burnout? And then what ways can people have balance, or is there a way to live always in service without burning out? That's a really good question. That's very relevant and something I've definitely thought about. Yes, you can definitely create a life of service without falling into burnout, but it's hard. You really have to be intentional. Um, I can speak from my own experience. Like by the time that I finished at Mexico, I was burnt out, and it wasn't because of any. I wouldn't necessarily say it was because of external factors. I mean, things were great there, but um, it was because I wasn't taking care of myself as I should have. Yeah, you have to balance self care, as the term goes, with like caring for other people and serving them. Um, and like just making sure that you get enough sleep each night, like kind of listening to your body. What do you need? Making sure that you're eating enough. Um, and also probably not eating too much as well. um, Exercising. There's obviously a lot of different facets, a lot of components about, how you can take care of yourself. And then you also have to make sure you'd have to learn to say no when you need to as well. When people are asking you for favors, kind of listening to when it's too much for you and you're just going to you're going to do something, you're going to be bitter. If you're saying yes to everything, you're not going to have time for yourself. You're going to feel obligated, and it's going to end up hurting you, and then it'll hurt other people in the long run. Um, and God forbid that ever happen. But that's kind of the effect of it. It's if we're not renewing ourselves, if we're not, um, constantly like trying to fill ourselves or trying to kind of re-energize and um, how do you put this? Yeah, to re-energize and just, I don't know, stay alert, kind of keep that love for what you're doing going, then it's going to get to you too much. And yeah, I feel like there's a lot I could say about it. I'm taking a class on this right now, actually. But that's kind of in a short answer. That's a very good, very good question. Um, and yeah, balancing it. Yeah, just making sure that you have time for yourself, time in silence, and recognizing when to say no. Obligations versus, things that you can say no to. Um, and, I think holy people kind of achieve an ideal of they serve so much, they don't need much sleep, they don't need much to eat. But for right now, we're all, we're a lot of us are still, below there. So yeah, thank you for the question, Katie. I hope that's an okay answer. Sorry, I'm so scatterbrained, but
That's okay.
yeah.
No, you did great, Gabe. Thank you so much for your time, and thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. We're really happy with all of our speakers and being able to bring this to everyone. I would just want to say that we have several more speakers lined up. If you want to learn more about those speakers, you can go to our website, click on the FOrCE. It's on the homepage, projectmexico.org. And yeah, Gabe, thank you so much for your time. And are you planning on going back to Mexico this summer, or was spring
God willing.
spring the only trip?
No, I hope not. Yeah, God willing, I'll be going back in the summer. Probably, yeah, for like, hopefully for like a week and a half, like late July, August, something like that. We'll see. But
Wonderful.
yeah, 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 I'd love to.
That's great.